Welcome to Dadogram number 5, where I'm telling stories from work, from back when I was in high school and college. Stories that can help you learn how to succeed at work now and in the future. I'm Jason M. Garrett, a retired Navy commander and pilot, now an investor and an entrepreneur. I'm also a dad who in 2021 sent his oldest daughter to college more than 1,000 miles away. In an effort to keep teaching her those things that I thought she needed to learn from me, I created my very first datagram in the fall of 2021, and I've been doing it ever since. Now I'm going back and putting some of those older datagrams on YouTube in order for her to review them now that she's starting school again, and also for my other two children to see them for the first time as well. And who knows, maybe far, far into the future, my grandkids and great grandkids could be watching them too. In my datagrams, I share our family's values and beliefs through stories. They're very much for my family, but each and every one of you are invited in as well, as I teach you how to overcome difficult challenges, how to succeed, and how to win. Today we live in a world of instant gratification, where we all need a dopamine hit within the first 3 seconds of watching a video. Well, I don't necessarily teach that way. You see, I know that mankind has been gathered around the campfire for thousands of years, listening to the story of the great hunt. That's how we're entertained, and that's how we're educated. That's probably part of the reason that I love being in the Navy so much. I love to listen to sea stories. That's when the old timers, someone with a lot of experience, would sit around and tell you their stories of action and adventure. I was certainly entertained and I was educated. By listening to them talk, I became a better Navy pilot. The reason stories are so valuable is that you learn from others, especially from their mistakes. Because after all, you can't live long enough to make all the mistakes yourself. So I'm going to tell you a story, a simple story from when I was 18 years old, way back in the year 1990. And through it, you'll learn something that can be valuable to you now and in the future. Now, I told a story about this particular job in datagram number 4, but in this datagram, it's a different story about the same job. So without any further ado, here we go. During my senior year in high school, I took art. I always liked art, was pretty good at it, but I knew I was never going anywhere with it. But bottom line is, I enjoyed the class, and apparently the teacher really liked to see the art that I could produce. He pulled me aside one day and told me that there was a company in town looking for somebody in his class who had great artistic skill who might be able to take on a summertime job. I was intrigued, so I listened. And that's when he told me about a company that makes replicas of high-end art sculptures out of plastic resins for an artist selling her stuff out of New York City. This was a teeny, teeny little town of about 6,000 people, but that was going on there. I didn't even know about it. I was intrigued. So he recommended me to this company, and I went there and I applied, and I got the job. Now, what they would do is they would pour a plastic resin into a mold of this particular person's art sculpture that they had created. Now, if you didn't do anything else to this plastic resin, you'd have to wait about somewhere between 1 and 5,000 years for it to harden up and be useful. Obviously, you had to do something about that. So what they would do is they would put in drops of catalyst that would cause it to react faster and dry. But it was very, very tricky. If you didn't put enough catalyst in it, the whole thing would be a sticky mess that might take weeks or months to actually dry so that you could actually do something with it. If you put too much catalyst in, it would get super hot and expand and crack and shatter in many cases. It would render it completely useless. You had to put in just the right amount. But still, even just the right amount would still make it still sticky on the outside for a couple days, or cause it to generate so much heat that it would have small cracks here and there throughout the sculpture. My job was to find those pieces that had the small cracks in it, and I would Dremel out a bigger channel of where that crack was, and then I would pour more of that resin in on top of that, creating kind of a buffer around it, let that harden, and then I would sand it down and smooth it and shape it so that you could not tell a repair had ever been done. That was the job. I went into it with absolutely no training of any kind. The two people who were supposed to train me were so backlogged on what they had to do, they didn't have time for the new kid coming here for a summertime job, so they didn't teach me much. And as I worked on it, I found out something pretty quickly. I lacked patience. I had none of it. It was frustrating for me to use the Dremel. I didn't like the way the torque would cause me to move it around, and oftentimes I made a bigger channel, if you will, that I needed to. Then I would pour the resin in, and I was impatient for it to hurry up and harden so that I could actually work it. And so I'd be trying to play with it while it was still soft and sticky. Or once it was good to go and I wanted to start sanding it down, well, I didn't like sanding. So I wanted to use that Dremel tool and cut into it some more, and then I would overcut and then have to resand. Bottom line is, I didn't have the patience for it, and I was not good at it. And that left me in a very uncomfortable position. I knew in my heart I was not producing enough value to justify my pay, not according to my standards of fairness. The employer wasn't getting enough productivity out of me, and I felt guilty about it. I felt I could get fired. That was definitely a possibility, be let go, and that would be kind of embarrassing because I can't imagine ever being fired from a job. And what I really felt in my heart was I should quit. I just didn't have the talent or perhaps the teaching of how to do the work to be able to be productive. So I found myself floundering right there. Now, if you remember in my last Dadogram 4, I had already gone through a terrible cleaning experience in which, well, watch Dadogram 4 and you'll figure it out. Bottom line is, I didn't think I really belonged in this particular work environment, and I was very, very worried about it, and I was thinking seriously about quitting. And then all of a sudden, one day, everything changed. So as it turns out, I was sweeping and cleaning like I have done, like I told in Dadogram 4, and I ended up working my way back into a small corner of this shop. And there was a small door there that I hadn't really ever noticed before. And there were two very seasoned, very experienced employees standing in front of that door arguing about who had to go in there and work. I didn't know what that was about. I just kind of kept sweeping, doing my job, moved on down to the other side of the building, was working there. But an hour later, I actually came back and one of them was stepping out of that small door, and I was surprised to see it. This person came out with a full respirator on with two big filters on the side, full visor over the respirator. They were fully gowned up, so they had this big white sheet that went all the way down to the floor around them. Their arms stuck out, but on their arms they had two thick, heavy leather gloves, and I was completely baffled. And as he came out, he was stripping the stuff off, taking the hat off, the gown off, taking his respirator off. And once that gown came off, I looked at him and he was absolutely covered in water. He was sweating so profusely. I happened to be able to take a quick look into that little room that he'd walked out of as he opened the door, and it snapped back shut again. And I recognized immediately what it was. It was a sand booth, meaning that they would take those big sculptures in there, laying them against the wall, and they would be in there for the next several hours just sandblasting away, taking all that sticky residue off the surface and leaving a nice, clean, workable surface afterwards. But somebody had to sit in that sand booth, and it was hot as hell in there. As it turns out, there was no ventilation of any kind. This was summertime in Kansas. It was already about 100, 101 degrees anyway, but inside that sand booth, where there was no ventilation of any kind, this temperature soared to over 115 degrees in there, and nobody wanted to go in there and do the work because nobody could take that kind of heat. Well, as it turns out, ladies and gentlemen, I, Jason M. Garrett, have a superpower. I'm not even kidding you. I can take heat like almost nobody I've ever seen or heard of since. All right? 115 degrees for me, that's just a nice warm day at home, okay? I have no problems with that kind of temperature and never have. As a kid, I was always out in the heat, flying helicopters for the Navy. In the Persian Gulf, it was 120 degrees outside. And inside of our greenhouse of a helicopter, it got a lot hotter than that in there, and I could fly 12 hours at a time with no issue in that kind of heat. That was one thing I could definitely do. And so I asked them if I could do the sandblasting for them. And do you know what they said? No and hell no. It's too hot, it's too dangerous, we can't have you doing that. Well, I talked to them over and over about it. I talked to them about the fact that I could take the heat. And one day I think they got tired of me asking, so they said, okay, fine, we'll let you go in there and see how you like to be hot and sweaty like that. So I did. I went into the sand booth, and it was quite a deal. You're almost up to about mid-thigh in sand, just drifted all over the floor. You got a big 5-gallon bucket that you're sitting on, another 5-gallon bucket that you would pour the sand into, and then a hose from the gun would actually pull out of this bucket of sand that you had, Then, of course, it was hooked to an air compressor. And you just sit there sandblasting in that heat, and pretty soon you'd fog over. You couldn't hardly see a damn thing through the visor because it had so much dust all over it. But that's what you would do for hours on end if you could handle it. And as it turns out, I could. I remember my very first time in there, after about 1 hour, all of a sudden everything goes quiet. The hose doesn't have any more pressure to it. The sandblasting stops. I can't figure out what's going on. I get out, I walk out the door, and everybody at work is standing there just wondering what in the hell I'm still doing in there after an hour. They said that they didn't think I could take it. And I let them know, hey, this kind of temperature for me, it's not a big deal. I can handle it. So from there on out, I was the guy who sandblasted for the company. The one thing nobody wanted to do was the one thing I could do to add value to that company, and that's what I took on. And I felt so much better about it. I kept that job all summer long, doing the hot work that no one else wanted to do, and to be honest with you, well, most people probably couldn't do. For me, I have a very strong moral compass. If someone has hired me for a job, I have to feel that I add value, commensurate with my pay. And that gets at another belief of mine, a belief in fair play. To have kept my job and continued to underperform while still getting paid well, that would have felt wrong to me, an unfairness to my employer. And I just couldn't do that. I had to seek out a way to add value, and I did. And I encourage you to do the same. So, the question for you right now is, are you adding value at work and being fair to the person who hired you? Or are you slacking? Playing on your phone, watching TikTok videos, or Snapchatting with friends while still on the clock? Or taking another smoke or vape break because, no one's really going to notice. No one really cares. Or are you sitting around visiting, justifying all of this by telling yourself, I'm not paid enough to do real work around here? If any of that is you, then that is wrong. And there are better ways to approach it. If you really aren't challenged in your job, find a way to do something that justifies your time there for you and your employer. Learn something new about your job that you can use in the future. Get started on something early for the next shift, or get something done that can help the team close down the place a little faster. Clean, organize, make the place more efficient or that appeals to customers a little bit more. I can't tell you how many times I've gone down to a local gas station type shop, gone in there and seen the shelves completely ransacked, try to get a soda, for instance, a pop or cola, whatever you call them, go up there and try to fill my cup just to find out that all the syrups are out and it's just somebody dispensing carbonated water. But then I look up at the counter, there's nobody else around except me and the person at the counter, and they're just sitting there, just scrolling through their phone like they got nothing better in the world to do. They do have something better to do. They're just not doing it. If you're really stuck, for Pete's sakes, ask your boss what you can do, or ask others around you what else you can do for them. And trust me, there is a lot that you can do. It's called taking the initiative, and it is worth its weight in gold to your employer. And if you really can't figure it out, and your boss can't help you figure it out, then put your 2 weeks notice in, get another job that can better align with your talents, and get to work. Add value for your new employer. That's the right thing to do. So how did it turn out for me in my job? Well, eventually seasons changed, figuratively and literally. I started school in the fall. I developed a cough that wouldn't go away. Remember, lots of plastic resin dust floating through the air, and I could literally feel it weighing down my lungs. I didn't like that at all. Remember this, there is no amount of money worth damaging your health for. Never. Okay? Don't do that. And then, of course, other things changed, like the hot summer became a cool summer, and then it became a colder fall, and I don't like cold. If taking the heat is my superpower, then the cold is my kryptonite. The sand booth went from being a nice, warm, comfortable 115 degrees to somewhere in the mid-50s, just sitting in cold sand for hours on end in 50-degree temperature. That is not this guy. That doesn't happen. No way, no how. I can't take that kind of cold. So I gave my 2 weeks notice, and I moved on to start college and Navy ROTC. And I eventually got a job working nights so that I could kind of work around my class schedules. And I feel I really did give the company good hard work for a kid just out of high school that justified my pay. I no doubt added value, and I was fair to my employer as he was with me. And I could live with that. And that's really what I wanted to talk to you about in this, another somewhat fun, I hope, Dadogram. Now, before I let you go, I want to leave you with two quotes. The first is this: the only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary, meaning that in order to be successful at work, you have to put in some hard work over a fairly long period of time. So develop a strong work ethic and learn to enjoy working hard. The next: you can't build a reputation on what you're going to do. You can't. And I'll talk about it more in a future Dadogram, but your reputation is earned by steady, consistent work over time, among other things. And a solid reputation is so very important to your success in this world. And it is so very hard to overcome a bad reputation if you ever get one. So strive to create and maintain a good rep throughout your life. Work hard, work long, work well, and win. All right, that's it. As usual, please subscribe to the channel to see the next Dadogram when it comes in, and hit that thumbs up. And until next time, go forth and conquer. Thank you.